Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Thank you. You want to keep the ball rolling with an anecdote from your previous week, Govinda Day?
Yes. I guess the big highlight was yesterday at 6 p.m., which happened to conflict with the beginning of our program. But I found out earlier in the day that I could sign up for a vaccination shot beginning at 6 p.m. online. And I got online and I'm scheduled to get my first shot tomorrow. And I was unexpectedly very excited about that. I got to the temple by the time we had our arti, and I was really kind of bouncing off the walls there. I haven't had any great anxieties, I don't think, over the virus, maybe a little bit at the beginning, but somehow knowing that I was getting the super shot, I felt very grateful and delighted that, maybe that's turning a chapter in this little episode we've all been going through together. That was my big event of the week.
Well, we're glad, when many members have retreated during the COVID, you've been very steady. attending all the time, social distancing, wearing your mask. You've been contributing in a major way at a time when others have been absent. Of course, we don't blame them for that, but you took the risk and you came through it unscathed, and now you're going to get your insurance. So congratulations. You should get a Vaishnav Medal of Valor or something, you know?
Well, I hope. I think Krishna's been protecting me. I think that he likes it when he sees his devotees coming to worship, and he can keep those viruses away.
I guess because you've opened the subject, I'll share mine first. And it also has to do with our getting the second shot. My Bobby and I got our second shot on Tuesday. And unlike, for me at least, unlike the first shot, the second shot laid me low. We got it in the morning. We went to the temple. We did some business at the temple. We installed the painting that Sri Bhai Bhavi had made of Lord Chaitanya with the help of 2 volunteers, Chris and Zach. Then we went to dinner at Sundari Priya's new place at 4 o'clock. We had kirtan and we had wonderful prasadam, and the whole time I was feeling okay. But I couldn't get up the next morning. Wednesday, I stayed in bed all day. I had chills. I was wearing a sweater, a hoodie, had 3 blankets, and I was still shivering, sweating, feeling all achy and feverish. I had a headache. So I read up on it, and it's true. When the second shot lays you low, it's a good sign, actually, your immune system is working. Bhai Bhavi didn't have any reaction, which I don't know if it's good or not. Everybody's different, but she put in a full day's work Wednesday. She didn't feel anything. And I hadn't felt anything after the first shot, didn't slow me down at all. But the second shot laid me low, and after reading up on it, yeah, it can happen. And it's good. It's a small price to pay because the vaccine apparently really does reduce symptoms, and it's almost eliminated death amongst the people that have received it. Okay, so that's my little story for the week. I have one other thing to share, and that is that we had scheduled the Las Vegas Festival of Colors for April 17th. We thought that enough time might have elapsed between now and April to make everything safe. And the parks people were overjoyed when we reached out to the Brian Salib and the parks people. They said, "Oh, we're glad." They just tripped over themselves to be helpful. But when we applied to the health department, they said you can't have more than 250 people. And so it's not worth it to drive all the way down to Las Vegas and spend all that money for 250 people. So we canceled Vegas. So those are my three bits of news. We installed Lord Chaitanya in the temple room. I got my second shot and it floored me, and we canceled Las Vegas. So who wants to be next?
I want to add a couple of editorial comments on yours, Caru. First off, you said that you were laid low on Wednesday, but you were up as usual on Wednesday for Wisdom Wednesday and gave a wonderful Bhagavatam class. So I guess that's your version of laying low. Just I wanted to note that for the record. And also, I was really blown away by the beauty of that painting of Lord Chaitanya. There's something, you have to get up close and really meditate on the expression in his eyes. There's a sublime beauty that is emanating. It's really, really spectacular. Everyone should see that.
I've already done an interesting thing when it was initially done. She posted it.
So I can go next. I'll start with the painting as well. When I saw the painting in the temple the next day, I sent a text to Vai Mataji and Caru Prabhu. So let me read it. We just came back from the temple. It's our great fortune to see the master in this masterpiece, which is painted by a master. If we want to describe it in words, it's hard to do that. But what we can say is simply sublime. And there is something about that painting, positioning like this, unbelievable. Oh, on the lines of the vaccine, all the young, wise and intelligent people are getting the vaccine. So Vinita is getting her second shot this week, the coming week. So that's a good news. And not so good news is I am still to fall in that category of wise, intelligent, and young. So I'll wait for my time.
Good for you.
Sharbu, we are on mute.
All right. Well, I'm glad you read that text because I don't remember receiving the text. I remember receiving your copy of the picture, but I don't remember receiving the text. Otherwise, I would have surely responded to you. Surabi, how was your week?
It was a regular week, Charu Prabhu. I am on 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, so that's all about Karma Yoga and exploration that I cannot ignore my duties as a family member, as a mother. So just doing that, and I'm not rushing with the Bhagavatam here. I am with you guys, so I am going slowly to absorb everything.
Is there a verse in the 3rd chapter that struck you, that jumped out at you?
There are few. One is 13th, and then other one is 27th. It's all about how to perform Karma Yoga, being in this life and still do not get attached to anything, and that will be a spiritual, highly Karma Yoga, not attaching to yourself for doing good or doing bad, and then doing what is right every day, not ignoring it, taking it seriously. And so that's what I was reading in Bhagavad Gita chapter 3.
You know, it's interesting because whenever we do a drama, devotees always, they covet the roles of the villain, Ravana, Kamsa, Hiranyakashipu, because on one level, they think that the villain is much more interesting. You know, he gets to do all kinds of bizarre laughs and cackle and make faces and be threatening and ghoulish and all. But it's really, the more you advance in spiritual life, the more you appreciate the virtuous, the righteous. There may not be as much happening externally, superficially, but the real excitement is going on with the saints and the sages and the avatars of God, because they're developing their adventures inner. They're overcoming obstacles. They're doing things that they know are right, even though they don't feel like doing them. And it's that conquering of oneself, that inner battle, that is ultimately the most exciting and most adventurous aspect of any story. So yeah, the 3rd chapter talks about the people that on one level look like they do the same thing every day. They just suck it up and they go on being good husbands, good employees, good employers, good wives and all. But it's more than meets the eye. There's character, there's integrity being built every single day when they do something that their mind and senses and emotions would rebel against. All right, who would like to go next? Rob, something about your week. Can you talk with your boy there? Will he allow you to talk? Okay, we'll revisit Rob. Kapil Ji.
Well, it's the same thing as I said, that the two excited thing were the vaccine news for Vinita, the painting, but also I think yesterday or day before, as we continue our reading of Ramayana, we were able to do the Sundarkand yesterday with kids, with friends, and mostly we do in Sanskrit. So some people they like, some people they don't like, but we continue to read the entire Sundarkand in one stretch. Yesterday was different, it was unique. We did in Sanskrit, but also in Hindi, the Hindi translation, and it was a lot of discussion. So kids, Ishan and Shivan, they were there and they enjoyed the story.
Wonderful, great. Is that your story, Ishan, or do you have some other story to tell about your last week?
Well, all my stories end up being debates, so here's another one. This Thursday was our national qualifiers, and we won in our district, so we're going to nationals.
Hey,
Just my,
oh,
Way
hey,
to go.
oh.
yeah, so that's the highlight of my week.
Carry the Krishna banner to the nationals.
Yeah.
Amrita Sundari, what devotional triumphs do you have to report from the last 7 days or so?
I can speak briefly.
Okay, yeah, please do, Rob.
So a good thing that happened this week is I was able to get my son. So that's always a great time. The challenging aspect is his mother's refusing to let me have him for even part of his birthday next month, and threatening to use legal action to take the car away that I have. So that's challenging, but it's given me an opportunity to surrender to Krishna and take the steps I need to protect myself without trying to control the situation. So it's kind of a good and bad.
Yeah, it sounds like you're, doing the dance. You're walking a tightrope expertly. How long is he with you for this stay?
Until Tuesday, so 5 days total.
Well, from the background sound, it sounds like he's really enjoying himself with his dad.
Yep, we're having a blast.
That's amazing, Rob. That's amazing to share. Thank you.
Rob, how
Thank you.
old is he?
He'll be 2 next month.
Oh, wow. You have your hands full.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't able to make it last night. I had good intentions to bring him with me, but it just didn't work out that way.
Did you ask him if he likes kirtan?
Oh, he loves kirtan. We listen to Krishna Das quite a bit, and he makes sure that he says night night to Krishna every night. So
Oh, awesome.
yeah, teaching him the ways as I understand them.
All right.
Rob has a really good understanding. He's over 300 episodes of Wisdom of the Sages. He's with us most Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays and Sundays. And his comments are always really insightful. So we appreciate you, Rob, a whole lot.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I appreciate you.
Listen to that. He's calling us Prabhujis. Haribo Prabhuji. That means you reach the point of no return. When you start calling everyone Prabhuji, you can't go back to the way you were before.
No. Especially when it flows so naturally.
In nature. So Govinda Dev, before you have to rush off to do your Sunday school, do you have time to read the verse and the first paragraph? Share some comments with us?
Yes. Canto 1.
19th verse? I hope.
Yeah. First chapter still, right?
1.2.19.
1.
1.2.19 that starts with Tada.
Whoa. Tada rajas tamo bhavaha kama loba dayas chaye cheta etayir anividam stitam sattve prasidati. As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness and he becomes completely happy. Purport. A living being in his normal constitutional position is fully satisfied in spiritual bliss. The state of existence is called Brahma Bhuta or Atmanandi, or the state of self-satisfaction. This self-satisfaction is not like the satisfaction of the inactive fool. The inactive fool is in the state of foolish ignorance, whereas the self-satisfied Atmanandi is transcendental to the material state of existence. This stage of perfection is attained as soon as one is fixed in irrevocable devotional service. Devotional service is not inactivity, but the unalloyed activity of the soul. what occurs to me reading this, I had read the 19th verse in the first chapter, and I don't know why I got confused about that, because we've been in the second chapter for some time. But it's actually the same thought I had when I read the 19th chapter in the first verse. We all live with our material covering, which means that we're attracted to material sense gratification, ego gratification, and the whole 9 yards of pleasures that are available in material life. And a living being's normal constitutional position has really nothing to do with that. We're meant for spiritual bliss, which is only available when the material covering starts to become eroded by devotional service, and you start to have spiritual perception and feel spiritual feelings that simply are on a completely different platform as what people get addicted to in material life. So the question that that is intriguing to me about that is, what is it that breaks down the armor, the material armor, that keeps most people from having appreciation for recognizing that, wow, this is really what I'm meant for. I really feel like this is what I was meant to do in my life. The bliss of kirtan, the bliss of being with devotees in the temple, the bliss of worshiping in the temple, that is something that I think once you get a taste of it, you're going to start calling everybody Prabhu, for one thing. I mean, I don't know if this is a place for me to be asking this question, but it just intrigues me how I thought as I read the verse in chapter 1, how my father, who's a really, really fine person who's led a truly wonderful life, doesn't have any real spiritual, I mean, I think in a lot of ways he's a very spiritual person, but he's not really taken with it. He's very much lives in his mind, very bright, analytical person. And my brother is the same way. So why is it that I'm so lucky that I'm associating with you people? And I really, really mean that, because some people have a taste for the spiritual, and for some people that even though they live good lives, virtuous, it just, you know, there's never a break in the armor. They never say, oh, wow, spiritual bliss I'm experiencing. You know, I feel like this is really what I was meant for. That's my thought.
I have a thought, and it certainly doesn't apply to your father, but it would apply to a lot of people. I'll give you an example. I was listening to Wisdom of the Sages the other day, Rob, and Kustuba recommended the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon about St. Francis. And I had seen it, you know, lifetimes ago. So we have movie night on Friday night. There's no yoga class. And so I asked everybody. We have a volunteer named Paul. We have a volunteer named Zach. We have Chris. We have Nicole. By Bobby. There's Raleigh. There's his wife, Indu. I said, would you like me to rent that movie from Prime, and we'll watch it? You know, there'll be popcorn, I'll cook veggie burgers and all. So we watch it. It was a fantastic movie. It was just wonderful. He talks about the soul and about the freedom of the animals and our connectivity, that the more we get focused on material things and bank balance and name and fame, the less we appreciate God through his natural elements like the wind and the sun and the moon. And it's just so full of joy, just natural joy in the creation of God. And yet one of our volunteers, he got up and walked out right in the middle of it. And then the next day, all of our volunteers agreed to stay for 3 weeks during COVID because of the risks of integrating new people we don't, it's not worth it to have them just for a week when you have so much risk with people traveling and coming here. So everyone agrees 3 weeks. He hadn't even been here a week. A good-looking guy, has a degree of philosophy from some college somewhere, and he just said, "I'm going." And I didn't say, "Why are you going?" or anything, because pretty much he's ending the relationship himself, and he's got his reasons. But started to think about it. I said, "What, there's a very congenial atmosphere here. We have some great volunteers. There's good service to do. There's the gardening, landscaping, cooking. There's the llamas. There's lots of tourism. There's good discussions at the night. Some of them play board games and all. Great movie and food and everything." And the only answer I could come up with was girls. At the moment, we don't have any pretty girl volunteers here. It's all guys, pretty much, except for Nicole, who's kind of with Chris. I mean, that's just my speculation, but when we have girl volunteers, nobody cuts their visit short. They extend. If they're here for 3 weeks, they'll take 5 weeks, and so sometimes the answer to the problem is that which is most obvious. Guys go from here to there. Oh, I love the idea that you're a spiritual community. Oh, yoga every night, so cool. Stimulating spiritual atmosphere. But then if there's no girls, he's gone to sniff around the next assignment. You know what I'm saying? Well, anyway, that's my 2 cents on the subject.
Well, so the subtext is all of those nice spiritual things, but what the person will not acknowledge to themselves is, and there's some really nice looking Madhajis here, and I just feel really good about life when I'm around them.
And unlike us, who use terms like Prabhu and Mataji, he doesn't talk or think that way.
Right. Right. Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you so much for your association. I do have to.
Okay. Thank you so much for the kirtan, reading, the comments, the humor, everything.
Hari Bol. Beautiful Krishna conscious day to all of you. Thank you.
Prabhuji, thank you so much.
I have to say, we'll go to anyone else who wants, but I have to say also, Prabhupada was not unaware that the fact in the Western countries, boys and girls grow up intermingling with each other. And that's one of the reasons, one of the practical strategic reasons why he allowed women to live in the temple. They don't really live in the temples in India, even to this present day. But Prabhupada said women can live in the temple, they can work side by side with the men. They shouldn't ever be alone. A single woman and a single man, or even a married woman and a married, should never be alone together. But he recognized that that's what we've become accustomed to. And so even brahmacharis are more likely to stay in a temple that is to some degree integrated. So Prabhupada said they are our sisters. Let them use their beauty to attract people to Krishna consciousness. And if you've ever looked at any of the films by Nrsimhananda or Siddhanta, it's always anyway, it's always the pretty girls that are front and center. So yeah, that can be the greatest asset, and it can be the greatest stumbling block as well. It's just a question of whether you want to exploit it for yourself, exploit the feminine beauty that God created for yourself, or whether you want to acknowledge that beauty comes from God and just use it as an incentive to knuckle down on your devotional service. But what do you think about all this, Kapilji and associates?
And associates. Probably an amazing verse that talks about why when sane people, they do insane things. When we see sane people or insane people in the material life doing sane things, we see a lot of people around us doing crazy things. And then finally, how can one transcend from these modes? And as Surabhi Mataji mentioned about 3rd chapter, there are amazing verses in 3rd chapter that talks about Prakriti, as she mentioned about 27. One of my favorites in that chapter is number 30th. So 3.30, Mai Sarvani Karmani. I love that verse. And
I haven't.
I see. uh, Prabhu, as we see Bhagavad Gita, there are every time when you read a chapter, you feel that this chapter is the best chapter. When you reach to the 18th chapter, as most authors, when they share their message, they pick the main message, they share the message, tries to reiterate a few times, but then in your conclusive statement, you again emphasize on the same point. And that's what Lord Krishna has done in the 18th chapter, talking about these three modes. There was the entire chapter, chapter 13th and 14th, dedicated on this concept. But in the 18th chapter, he said that when you are in the mode of goodness, I think that's where you get the real knowledge. When you are in the modes of passion, that develops greed. And when you are in the mode of ignorance, and that is the primary reason that I am here in this material world, because that creates foolishness, that creates madness, and most importantly, that also creates illusion. In 14th chapter, Krishna also talks about when you are in these respective modes, what is the ultimate gati? You may reach to the heavenly planets if you are in the mode of goodness. If you are in the mode of passion, you are here on the earth, and then ignorance can take you into the hellish planets. But the most important message, Charu Prabhu, it comes from one of your previous lectures, and it is such an amazing analogy, very simple to understand, that we have three main colors. Like, this word is very colorful, but there are only three primary colors, RGB. And if you have the right composition from those three colors, we can create the magic that we have seen in the temple last week. And similarly, when you have these three modes, I think those three modes creates these 8 million plus species, as you mentioned in one of your lectures as well. But I think when we talk about progress, the progress is once you need to understand this, and then you transform from one guna to other, and then you ultimately achieve the Brahminical state, which is the Sattva guna, which is not the ultimate destiny as a devotee we aspire, because at that stage, at least you start understanding, at least you know what is right and what is not, what is wrong. And then the next step is transcendenting to being a Vaishnava, which is beyond these three modes. And at that, I think, as Prabhupada is going to mention in the second second paragraph, that's how you achieve the Sattva Shuddhi. And that's where you are eye to eye. You have that blissful encounter with Lord, the state of Sattva Shuddhi. So, Prabhu, that's my understanding of this paragraph. Yeah.
I was thinking what we said, I think last week or the week before, that in the material mode of goodness, it's like saying someone's a good prisoner. Within the prison house, you have very badly behaved prisoners. You have prisoners that are in the medium level, and then you have what they call model prisoners. But the goodness they exhibit is forced. They don't really have many choices. They don't really have many options. They either have to go with the program or not go with the program. Real goodness can only be when you're presented with a number of different choices and you make the best one. And sometimes it's not the easiest one. Sometimes the best choice is the hardest choice to make because it's the right thing to do. It's not the convenient or the easy or the comfortable thing to do. So the goodness, the good prisoner, the goodness in the prison house is really not, it's kind of an oxymoron, because if they were really good, they wouldn't be in the prison house in the first place. So it says, Urdvam Gachanti Sattvashta, material goodness, it leads you to the higher planets in this material world, to like a class A prison cell. Madhyata Santi Rajasa, being in the mode of passion, equates to this middle planetary systems at Opatanti Tamasha. And doing activities in the mode of ignorance leads you to take birth amongst the hellish planets. But the problem is that whether you're on the upper, middle, or lower, you're conditioned and you're forced by those modes of material nature, more or less into certain patterns of behavior. You really, if you want to follow this example further, the really good person is not the person who has no or very limited choices, but they're, in other words, they're not good by free will, they're good by force. And the same thing is true of the animals. You know, we like to think about how innocent the animals are. Well, they're not necessarily innocent, they just don't have any options. They have to act according to what Prabhupada calls the stringent laws of material nature. So we pat a dog on the head and we say, good boy. We give a horse a carrot, we say, good boy. But we have to recognize they don't have an option. They pretty much have to be good. But that good is a far cry from our standards of good as human beings, because we have far more choices. And so the difference between the material mode of goodness and Vishuddhasattva, spiritual goodness, is that in spiritual goodness, you're outside of the influence of the modes of material nature. You're in that free, unlimited, unconditional spiritual atmosphere. You're basically in tune with and resonating with the devotional service of the Lord. That's why we want to go from goodness to pure goodness. That's the only level of goodness that's really meaningful in terms of fulfilling our life's purpose.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you speaking of the purpose, in our Gita class yesterday, we were talking about the ultimate goal. We were talking about the yoga ladder, and then I think the two final ladders were the sadhan bhakti and rag anurag bhakti. And it was such an amazing analogy that, see, ultimately one must aspire for that, and then when you do that, there are a lot of byproducts. Even though someone who's in a pure devotee, who's not focusing on these other things, when they focus on a particular goal, they get a lot of byproducts. And as Prabhupada, in this particular verse also, it is mentioned that he becomes completely happy, because it says that even though you are desiring for the ultimate goal, the happiness, bliss, confidence, detachment, freedom from Maya, respect, name, fame, and prestige, they all are the byproducts. If you focus not only on the goal, but also the processes that can help you achieve that goal with the right association. So I really love that analogy, that to reach to that Sattva Shuddhi, it's not that you are trying to give away all other things. Those are basically the byproducts. And I think the biggest problem that we discussed today is when you start focusing on byproducts as your main goal of life.
Excellent. Ishan Ji, Pandit Ji, what do you have to add?
I haven't actually read the purport yet, but the translation, I think the most interesting part for me in the translation is the effects of the natures, or the effects of the natures, modes of passion and ignorance. And I think that it's very, very key, because sometimes we feel like we can like transcend, I guess, just all of these modes. But like I forgot where I read this, but there's obviously these three modes present everywhere, whether it's like the day, in the morning it's mode of goodness, midday it's mode of passion, and in the evening it's mode of ignorance, the days of the week, etc., etc. So I feel like you can't you can't just fully ignore modes of ignorance and mode of passion, but what you can do is you can ignore the negative consequences that come out of them. And, or I guess not ignore, but if you have Krishna in your heart and you can feel that, then you will be able to go past the effects and not get bogged down in these modes.
Excellent. It's like being in a big ocean liner. The ocean may rise and fall. You may be hit by waves, but because you're in a big, strong boat, you just feel them as slight tremors. You're not really affected by the waves. On the other hand, if you're right down there in the water, then you're going to be very, very, very negatively impacted by any wave, even the slightest, smallest wave. But if you're in the ocean liner, samsritaye para palava pabam, you've taken shelter at the ocean line or Krishna's lotus feet, then even the biggest tsunami waves are not going to be more than just a slight tremor.
Yeah. For the point that Govindadev Prabhu raised about the family members and getting birth in a particular family, I think in the 7th canto, Prahlad Maharaj, some of his prayers or the dialogue that he has talks about that how he feels the mercy of Lord on his head, which he compares it with some of the greatest of demigods. They may not have that kind of mercy. Lord Brahma talks about the same thing in the 10th canto of Bhagavad. But I think that one thing that comes to the mind, speaking of Ramayana, as we are reading this, when we focus on the characteristics that Ravan presents versus Kumbhakaran and Vibhishan, that is a very good way of understanding that when someone who's in the utmost passion, and that passion can make you Ravan. The best example of ignorance is Kumbhakaran. And then Vibhishan, within the same dynasty, same family, just because of the mercy and his focus on the ultimate goal, I think he's a great example of someone who's in the goodness. So whenever the analogy that you gave of RGB, those 3 colors, as well as Ravan, Vibhishan, and Kumbhakaran. So RGB and RKV are the 2 things that I'll remember whenever I see people and myself transitioning from these modes.
KS. Saravi always has her Bhagavatam with her, so if you're following Saravi, I'd like to ask you to read the 2nd paragraph of the purport. Let me share some of the comments here from Veronica, who I believe is in Europe. She says Bhagavad Gita 14:18. She likes also 14:26. As for Sita Sattva, her favorite is Srimad Bhagavatam 4:323. If you get a chance, Kirtan, Veronica, just give us the links to that so that we can click right through. Jayasri Radhe says, yes, she agrees with the House of Sharma. The byproducts are many times the distraction to pure devotional service. William Griffith from Los Angeles is spending an idyllic weekend with his Lakshmi, Ali, but they're tuned in here, making exception to their couples retreat by being tuned in to our discussion here. We also have Anjali also joining us on Facebook Live. Oh, Saravi, are you there? And would you care to
Yes.
second paragraph of the purport and add any comments that you'd like to do so?
Sure. The soul's activity becomes adulterated in contact with matter, and as such, the deceased activities are expressed in the form of lust, desire, hankering, inactivity, foolishness, and sleep. The effect of devotional service becomes manifest by complete elimination of these effects of passion and ignorance. The devotee is fixed at once in the mode of goodness, and he makes further progress to rise to the position of Vasudev, or the state of unmixed sattva or Sudha sattva. Only Shuddha sattva. Only in the Shuddha sattva state can one always see Krishna eye to eye by dint of pure affection for the Lord. So I think Kapil already explained everything, coming eye to eye with the God and reaching that position. But yeah, so I'm not sure. I don't have any comment with that, but I can understand what Kapil said. And also with Govind Prabhu's comment, like there are 3. So Kapil, again, he's explained that there were in one dynasty, there were 3 people. And I also think, like, reading Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, it's always a karma associated from this life or the past life that brings you to like where you are right now in the spiritual path.
When you read this this phrase, eye to eye, see Krishna eye to eye, what do you think of? Because in the Western countries, a lot of people think you can't see God, and here Prabhupada saying we can see him eye to eye. What do you think about that?
I think the association with the God, and like at I can tell you my story that when I growing up, and I have some influence of Krishna. When I was little, I thought him as my friend. When I became little adult, I saw him like my big friend, and now it's like beyond that. As a guru, giving you way how to live the life.
So would you agree that Indian culture is predicated much more on the possibility of seeing God, not necessarily by our own efforts, but as it says here, by pure affection? God's, I think in India, people see God as more willing to show himself than they
Yes,
do in the Western countries.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you think about it, why wouldn't the father show himself to his affectionate son? I mean, why would you think that he wouldn't? What kind of a God wouldn't? I mean, obviously he was showing himself to Jesus Christ. And so when, I don't know why people say you can't, no man can see God. Well, we can't, but God can reveal himself to his affectionate devotees. Like when Shringadev came out of the pillar, he was roaring mad. He was roaring. Nobody could even look at him. You know, his roaring was so loud, it was threatening to break their eardrums. His form was so fierce, they couldn't look at him. Everybody was looking away, averting their glance. And yet Prahlad Maharaj just walked right up and got on his lap. So he who was, others were unable to behold, Prahlad, the Lord allowed Prahlad, who had been faithful to him. Even the demigods were feeling a little guilty because they stood by while Hiranyakashipu harassed his son. They didn't intervene. They didn't try to save Prahlad. They were too scared of Hiranyakashipu to step in. And so when Nrsingadeva was roaring, they thought, maybe Nrsingadeva is going to kill us too. Maybe Hiranyakashipu was just the first one he held accountable. Maybe he's going to then go down the line and Indra, Kuvera, and yada, 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 yada. So they were like hanging back. And yet Nrsingadev was, he was just like a mother kitten to Prahlad. He was like an all-destroying lion, the picture of destruction and ferocity to everybody else. But to Prahlad, he was just like a mother. Prahlad was just like a kitten to the mother cat. And so people in the West sometimes say, no man can see God. And in India, they say, well, how can you not see God? How can you not see God? If you have any affection for him, if you've done any service for him, then your eyes become anointed with the salve of love. Without love, of course, nobody can see God. But when you have love imparted to you in the service of the spiritual master, then God reveals himself to his affectionate devotees. So good points. Amrita Sundari, are you back with us? We called on you before, but you were not here.
Yes, Prabhuji, I think my unmute didn't work. I was speaking, but you couldn't hear me.
Oh, sorry. Well, we'd love to hear drops of nectar from your lotus mouth.
Please, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to assembled devotees.
Are you in your temple room now?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So this is such a nice verse, and the discussion so far is very enlivening. Do you want me to read the third paragraph?
Yeah. Just read the last paragraph. Make any comments that you want. We'd love to hear anything that you have to say. Your realizations are so deep.
A devotee is always in the mode of unalloyed goodness, therefore he harms no one. But the non-devotee, however educated he may be, is always harmful. A devotee is neither foolish nor passionate. The harmful, foolish, and passionate cannot be devotees of the Lord, however they may advertise themselves as devotees by outward dress. A devotee is always qualified by all the good qualities of God. Quantitatively, such qualifications may be different, but qualitatively, both the Lord and his devotee are one and the same. So, this verse talks about being established in devotional service to the Lord. And the verse from Bhagavad Gita 7.28 talks about the qualities of a person who is engaged in devotional service with determination. And there are two characteristics. One who has been free from sin in this life and previous life, and one who is free from the dualities of delusion. So once you're in the stage of goodness through devotional service, you will not commit sinful activities because you're in knowledge of Lord being the proprietor and you being a part and parcel, and you understand the relative position of everything else and everybody else as belonging to the Lord, so you wouldn't harm anybody. And thus you will not break any of the laws of the Lord, and you will not commit sins. And whatever you have done in the past lives will also be eradicated because of devotional service. So that's one part. The second part is when we are free from mode of passion and ignorance, it means we are not distracted by any of the events that is happening in our life. We are strictly situated in service to the Lord, because passion and ignorance is what divert us the most. And once you are free from that because of executing devotional service, then any kind of disturbance that come across, you can see it in a broader sense. So basically, once you're determined to serve the Lord in any situation, actually it is possible. And by situating in that devotional service to the Lord, you're free from, lamentation and fear and anger and anxiety. Not only that, you're free, but you're happy in whatever situation you are in. The second verse of the first chapter, this is what it talks about. Dharma prohijita ketav. One is free from all kinds of miseries by following this higher dharma of serving the Lord in any situation. And as Rupa Goswami says, it is possible to serve Lord ahetukena pratihata. So everything combines. It's just a matter of getting that right knowledge and purity of the heart that I can serve Krishna in any situation. And as Narad Muni says, the same things that earlier caused us bondage, they become a source of freedom for us, because we are able to see things in the right perspective.
You've already answered the question that I had on my mind, but I wanted to refer to a couple of sentences in the previous report where Prabhupada says, in contact with matter, disease activities of the soul are expressed in the form of lust, desire, hankering, inactivity, foolishness, and sleep. So these are all the byproducts of the contact of the soul with matter. And Krishna talks about renouncing our association with matter, getting separate from the modes of material nature. So a lot of people, and in fact, Arjuna is somewhat confused about this as well, because Krishna says, Sanyasham karmanam krishnam, sanyasha karmayogascha, karmascha mahabaho. Krishna is talking about sannyas, renunciation. And Arjuna asked him to clarify. So my question is, because material activities cause all these unwanted things, lust, desire, hankering, foolishness, sleep, then is the best course to just become passive, be a non-doer, because our actions are reaping misery. Should we then just cease to act? That would seem to be the logical conclusion.
No, actually, by our own constitutional position, we cannot cease to act. We are always thinking, we are always consuming. We need to survive. Our mind is active, and we have this, soul by nature has desires. You can curb it for some time. You can, try to shut it, close it, but you can never get rid of them. The only thing we can do is to purify them. And soul we see anything that has life will grow, will produce byproducts, will dwindle, or, and that nature has to be properly used. Otherwise, you cannot suppress it for long. And matter is Krishna's energy. Anything used in Krishna's service spiritualizes it. So whether it's subtle matter or gross matter, Prabhupada says, the mic I'm using to record my translations of Srimad Bhagavatam, is a spiritual asset now because of its proper use. Negation doesn't solve the problem. Positive engagement solves the problem.
Ravi was talking about the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I think these two verses are in the third chapter. The karmanam manarambam naiskamam nacha sanyasana siddhim vidanti mano. No, the karma. No, wait a minute, that's not it. Karma brahma bhavan vidhi brahma kshatrasam tajman sarvagatam nitya yagya pradishtanam. Krishna says transcendence is not in opting out. It's not in going to the forest. It's not in sleeping. It's not in giving up activities, but it is transcendence is situated in acts nitya yagya pratishtatam. Transcendence does not consist of giving up activity, but it consists of making your activity an offering, a yagya to Krishna. And then as far as what the other verse, I think that's also in the third, sadhusham chestate shasha prakritam gyanam prakritam yan nigraham kim karishati. Krishna tells Arjuna that you cannot not act. Said you can go off into the forest, you can walk off the battlefield, you can give up the fight, you can go to a forest ashram and try to be peaceful. But as soon as there's any injustice in your neighborhood, the first thing you're going to do is reach for your bow, because that's your nature. You cannot give. And then nakarmanam anarambam naiskamam nachanjanj siddhim vidanti. Perfection does not consist in giving up activities, but it consists, number one, as you said, acting according to your nature, and number two, making that a God-centered act. Yadkara, making that act for the satisfaction of the Lord.
So we see like Arjuna didn't want to act because it was painful for him to act, but Krishna wanted him to act. And of all the things, violence is something which is hard to spiritualize it in one sense. If you're a believer of non-violence, then that becomes the hardest thing to call it a spiritual activity. But we see throughout the war and even after the war, how Arjuna treated Ashwatthama. Everything about what Arjuna did and what Krishna did was, now we can understand how it is a spiritual activity, even the gross action of killing another living entity's body. But it was done for the establishment of dharma. And now when Krishna left the planet and Arjuna was again devastated, and in that mood of separation and devastation, he again remembered Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita. And that time, because Pandavas had done their duty, they had Parikshit Maharaj to take care of the kingdom, they all retired. But that retired is again not inactivity. Internally and externally, they were fully devoted in remembering and serving Krishna till they reached the spiritual abode, So inactivity is never an option for the spirit soul. It's just the mood of your offering to Krishna. Earlier it was the war, and then it was Manmanama Badmadbhakto, The Pandavas just were immersed in thought of Krishna because they had done their duty.
The more that you get familiar with bhakti, the more likely you are to act.
Yes. Even like, your eyes, you kind of, rise from the sleep, even before you open your eyes, you remember Krishna and you remember, I have to do something. You become active even in your sleep, just like, the yogi is active while the materialist is sleeping, then that becomes a natural hankering of the soul to serve Krishna.
Arjuna in the beginning was inclined not to act. He was inclined to give up his duty, go to the forest, pack it in, throw in the towel. He was frustrated, he was confused, he didn't know which way to turn. Everything was topsy-turvy. But after getting the knowledge of Bhakti Yoga, after having poured into him, poured into him the 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita, then everything comes to a point. Everything comes to a very dramatic, suspenseful point where in the 18th chapter, Krishna says, Iti te jnanam akyatam guyam guyatanamaya parmishatara sheshana yate chashi tadakaru. Someone with a superficial, concocted, speculative idea of things, a pseudo-philosopher, he might have taken it to a certain point of realizing the frustration and the pointlessness of material activity, and then just chucked it all in. But after Krishna, Krishna said, I've given you the most confident. I haven't just given you standard off-the-shelf knowledge. I've given you guyam guyataramaya. I've given you the most confidential knowledge, which is that when you act for my satisfaction, you are inactive. You are inactive. You do not reap any negative results either for you or for anybody involved in that scenario. That is the guyam guyataramaya. That is the secret of all secrets. That is the most confidential of all knowledge. And then Krishna asks Arjuna a question. He says, Iti gyanam gyanam yate chashi tatak. Anyway, iti gyanam akatam guyam vimishe tara sheshana yate chashi tatak. He asks Arjuna, now what are you going to do? So Krishna is actually answering his own question, because he doesn't say, okay, Arjuna, so now sleep on it. So now go home. So now meditate on it. So now go to your therapist. So now, take some time. He says, what are you going to do? In other words, right now, you need to act. You have the choice not to. You always have your free will. But I'm asking you right now, we're on the battlefield, we're between the two parties, everybody's ready to fight. What are you going to do? And Arjuna now is joyful. He's joyful. He's free from doubt. He's got his confidence back, and he says, Krishna says, what am I going to do? I'm going to do what you tell me to do.
Exactly. Renunciation comes in different doses, right? They say samshan vairagya. Once you take somebody, a near one, to the funeral pyre, you develop renunciation. You're like, oh, this world is waste, it's futile. The youngsters of America in 70s who were opposing the government, they were also exhibiting renunciation. They left homes, their jobs, their money. But this kind of what Krishna says, renunciation in mode of ignorance or passion doesn't satisfy the soul, doesn't serve the purpose. Renunciation has to come with knowledge, and proper knowledge comes through serving Krishna. And then every moment you have that choice, like you're in a family situation, one family member is angry with you, he's not cooperating, then how do you act with that person? That in that moment of heat and anger, if you can remember what pleases Krishna, you try to raise your consciousness, you try to raise the other person's consciousness. You renounce your ego, and you try to see how in this, troublesome situation am I going to do something that pleases Krishna, So that renunciation helps, not external renunciation.
Good points. I was thinking of an example. Let's say there's a polluted river, and people that drink the water, bathe in it, get sick. So the course of action is not to stop the river or to dry up the river or to punish the river. The river needs to keep flowing, but you just need to take the impurities out. So it's our nature. God is active. He's the most active person. We're his parts and parcels. So we cannot be inactive. That's just a pipe dream. That's phantasmagoria.
Exactly.
The solution to our problems is not to stop acting, not to stop the river, the flow of our activities, but to just purify them. And to do that, we need to do what Arjuna did. We need to hear the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam from Krishna.
Perfect.
Surabhi, do you have a comment? Rob, are you also on a comment after Surabhi, if you're in a position to do so?
So there were two examples, one of Janaka, where Krishna says that Janaka also did his duty. He was a king, but he was renunciated to that level that he did not attach himself to for the society and all that. And also he gave second example saying that you are the leader and social and civilization based on that thing. So as a leader, if you stop enacting, the whole system will collapse. So you have to act. And me being also a Kshatriya, I'm doing everything in my capacity, and I'm detached with everything. So
Even Krishna says, Name partashti kartavyam, says there's nothing for me to do. I'm God. Everything runs by my independent energies, which are jnana bala kriyaha. They're full of strength, they're full of direction, and they're full of ability. Everything is going on automatically. So there's nothing for me to do. Krishna said, Name partashti trishu lokashu, within the whole three worlds, upper, middle, there's nothing for me to do. None of uptim viptim apart. But if I should cease to work, I, the supreme being who sets the standard, if I should cease to work, all the worlds would be put to ruination. So nowhere is inactivity or passivity mentioned. It's false renunciation to give up one's duty. Rather, in spite of troubles, in spite of inconvenience, one should do one's duty. After all, duty is what you're suited for. What talents, abilities, what gives you pleasure and satisfaction. That's how God made you. And if you're properly plugged into the duty that's right for you and your temperament, you're going to be happy. Arjuna wasn't unhappy about fighting. He was a warrior. He loved war. He just couldn't push through to seeing his duty in terms of fighting his relatives. But once Krishna removed that contamination based on the bodily connection, Arjuna was back to his old self. He loved nothing more than a good fight. Rob, you want to wrap things up for us if you're in any position there with your visitor? Okay, he's got his hands full. 2 years old, I think he said, right? His 2-year-old. Kapil, you want to give us a wrap up here, and then we'll go to Amrita Sundari's Kirtan? Kapil or Ishan?
Yes.
Well, I feel like the biggest takeaway for me from here is the kind of this like concept of it's not like black and white, right? You can't just be in mode of goodness and then later be just in the mode of passion. There's a mix constantly between those two. And in the purport, it mentions unalloyed, right? Something that's pure and not contaminated with other modes. And I just like real quick story I have when I think it was Yugal Kishore Prabhu, he was here, he gave a talk on this concept of on the three modes of material nature. So I had a question to him after that. You mentioned Ravan is the mode of passion, and Kumkaran is the mode of ignorance. But everywhere else I look in the world, I see that the mode of ignorance is always worse than the mode of passion. So why is it that in this case the mode of passion is worse than the mode of goodness or mode of ignorance? And he told me that it's not just that Ravan is in the mode of passion, it's that his mode of passion fuels his mode of ignorance, which is an active mode of ignorance, whereas Kumkaran has an inactive or a passive mode of ignorance, where he's just sleeping constantly. But what the kind of things that Ravan is ignoring is tied with his mode of passion, and that's why you can't just be in the mode of passion. You have to be, there's always a mixture of the different modes. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me from this.
Oh, that's an incredible insight. Yeah. Prabhupada said, what were the types of people? There was the lazy intelligent, the active intelligent, the lazy foolish, and the active foolish. So the active foolish is the monkey. Wherever the monkey goes, he never does anything constructive. He's always optimistic. He always destroys things. So better be passive foolish than active foolish like the monkey, because you'll just cause disruption and chaos wherever you go. But then as far as intelligence, there's active intelligence and then there's a passive intelligence. So if your intelligence is polluted, like Arjuna's was, then the tendency is, if you don't know what to do, then the best thing is to do nothing, just sit in the corner if you don't know what's the best option. But if you do know what's the best option, if you have the advantage of being trained up and illuminated by a bona fide spiritual master, then you are in the category of active intelligence. You can act without any concern with negative results. You can act on the order of the Lord, knowing that he knows everything past, present, and future, and that he's directing you towards the best possible of all outcomes. So only action in Krishna consciousness is recommended. Otherwise, if someone's not Krishna conscious, then it's better they be in the category of inactive intelligence. It's better that you do nothing if you don't know exactly what to do and in whose honor you should do it.
So yeah, another important point that you mentioned is not punishing the river and understanding the difference between river and the cause of that sickness. That is an amazing analogy, Prabhu. One should always remember that often for the problems that we have, the problems that we create, we often try to blame someone else or try to punish them. So that's a great message today. The other problem is, or the cause of problem is this attitude of understanding that who is the servant versus someone who should be served. And the problem is when servants start aiming to become the master, or servant wants to enjoy, or servant wants to be the proprietor. I think that's the cause. And then mix with this analogy, when if you are in that mode, you often try to punish the river. So I think that is the main takeaway for myself.
Super. Hey, we have to have a word from Shivan there. The
Ooh.
middle guy, the guy in red. Give us a word of wisdom for today, Shivan.
Like we were talking about Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad Maharaj. I just want to say that Prahlad Maharaj had so much confidence and so much like he knew that Krishna will help him. Like when he was when Hiranyakashipu pushed him off the mountain, and Krishna came and caught him, and he had so much belief and that when Hiranyakashipu said like, where is Bhagwan? And he said he's and Prahlad Maharaj says he's everywhere. And then Hiranyakashipu is even in these pillars, and then he breaks one pillar, then breaks another, and then when he breaks another pillar, and then there's nursing.
Thank you very much for that. Very, very insightful, deep comments. Thank you, Shivan. I'm glad I called on you. My gosh, amazing. Any other? Rob says he can't comment because he's tied up. So let's hope that's not literal. Rob, if you're literally tied up, see if you can push 911 with the phone, with your nose on the phone. We also hope you're not figuratively tied up with the modes of material nature as well. But we'll look forward to hearing from Rob next week. Also, he's got his 2-year-old son with him until Tuesday, so we're very happy for that. Thanks also for Veronica Kirtana Hall joining us and commenting profusely. Divya Joshi, Anjali, William Griffith also with his, yeah. Rob texted, haha, just my hands full. So, okay, he's not bound hand and foot by his 2-year-old son, nor after having heard our discussion, is he bound by the modes of material nature. So he's a free man, but he just too busy right now. I'm trying to, for some reason, earlier when I was tuning in also, everything was very slow here. We've got a good Comcast internet connection, but for some reason it's very sluggish. So I can't actually call. Okay, here we are. Jai Shri Shah joined us. William Griffith, Divya Joshi, Onkar, who gave a wonderful talk in the temple last night. Terry Berger, Radhe Sham, Jai Sri Radha Dasi, as well as Anjali. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for liking. You're welcome to comment. You're welcome to share. You're welcome to join us next Sunday for the Salt Lake City Zoom Sanga that we have every week. We have other programs Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Srimad Bhagavatam, Saturday and Sunday night, motivational talks as well. Thank you, one and all. We're going to go now to a beautiful kirtan by Amrita Sundari to close out our Zoom Sangha. Thank you. Whoa. Oh my gosh. I think I just have to pick myself up from within the cracks of the floor, just oozed all over the place in ecstasy. Well, I think everybody will agree with me. That was a sublime.
Haribol.
Wow. Oh, that was good, wasn't it, Kapilji? Yeah. Well, thank you for that wonderful ending Kirtan Amrita Sundari. Thanks to Govinda Dev. I had to leave early for the beginning Kirtan and for his comments. Thanks, Sarabi. Thank you, Kapilji, Ishan, Shivan. Thank you, Rob, and your son. I'm going to ask what his name is next time. If you get time, text us the name of your son. We'd all like to know his name. Thanks, Jayashri Shah, for joining us on Facebook. William and Ali Griffith, Divya Joshi, Onkar Joshi, Terry Berger, Radhe Sham joined us from Tooele, Jayashri Radha, and Anjali. Thank you all so very, very much for joining us. Let's see if we've got Rob's son's name here. Okay, well, maybe next week we'll get it. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a wonderful discussion, wonderful kirtans. Everything about Krishna is always wonderful. He never lets us down. He never disappoints us. That's his nature. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasinubhyavcha padinam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Ram,
Hare
Ram
Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare.